Welcome back, everyone, to Detection Dispatch, the podcast that takes you right into the world of what's happening with detection engineering. I'm your host, Alex. I am bringing you the very latest in DE strategies, practical use case. We debunk myths here. And very soon, I'll also be hosting our SecOps Jeopardy, the holiday special here on Dispatch December 19th. So stay tuned for that. Today, though, we have a very special guest who quite simply is kind of changing the game and really shaping what's next for detection management. So we're going to be tackling detection as code, because if you aren't treating your detections like code, like what the hell are you even doing, right? So listeners, on the pod today, we have Wade Wells. Thank you so much for coming on and joining us.
Yeah, no, thank you for inviting me. Super happy to be here.
You guys can follow Wade on Wading Through Logs on X, Twitter. He's also, we love him, and the community is an active content creator. And I feel like he's just publishing really great content all the time. He's got his own website, WadingThruSecurity. He's also very active in the B-Sides, specifically the San Diego local community, right?
Correct. Yeah, I'm on the board for B-Side San Diego out here. Yeah, fun stuff.
Yeah. And you just launched your own podcast.
Yes,
Yeah, that was nominated for the SANS Podcast Awards.
No. So the my own podcast is Simply Defensive. I do that with Josh Mason over at the Simply Cyber, and then I'm also part of the Black Hills Information Security Talking About the News podcast. That one just got nominated for the SANS Difference Maker Award. So
we love to see that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, the podcast, and just in general, what originally drew you to the space? What keeps you so passionate and just kind of always, blessing us with your active content creation?
Yeah. The Simply Defensive podcast is definitely a bit more people in the trenches, right? I wanted to find people who normally aren't on podcast, who do work in the defensive field, that are willing to talk about maybe their problems and how they solved it and how they came up. There's a lot of difference in a bunch of different people, and I like to get those stories out and kind of have some good feels. There's a couple really good episodes. My favorite one so far is with if you go look at it, watch Jibby's episode. He's one of my friends. Yeah, Jibby. He is a threat researcher over at Microsoft, and his story is amazing.
Really?
For getting in the field. Like, I've always been super big into tech, but I'm always big into helping people as well. So I thought this was an excellent crossover of being able to protect people as well as being able to go into tech and constantly learn and push myself. I find now that I'm kind of becoming a little bit older. I've been in the industry for coming up on 9 years. You see stuff over and over again. Yeah, right. It feels like yesterday, but I'm finding being part of the community is being the most rewarding part. Right. That's why I help with B-Side San Diego, or I do a lot of mentoring, as well as just pushing a lot of more of like entry level information out there to individuals.
So that is exactly what we're all about. I think there should be so much more of it, community sharing, like just showcasing what all the cool shit people are working on. But before, it wasn't really that much out there, but now I'm seeing more and more of it, like people like you. And that is exactly what we should be doing in the defense space.
Yeah, it's definitely blowing up, right? And the red team gets all the glory. I feel like they're the quarterback, right? And the defense need at least a little bit of shoulder tapping out there, and to get our story across, and understand that catching the hackers is just as hard as usually as hacking people.
Well, I want to pick your brain on exactly that. So let's break it down first, right? First things first. Can you give us, Wade, what is your definition of detection as code?
Yeah, detection as code. The definition in itself is like very hard to give, right? A lot of people don't understand it, but for me, it's more of a software development lifecycle for detections. And if that needs even more down, it's usually like you're implementing a CI/CD process for detections within your environment, right? There are a bunch of different things out there, but detection as code is. There's also a tool called Panther, which is in Python, right? Which is detection as code. Actually, you're writing Python descriptions. But when I'm talking about detection as code, it's more of treating your detections in this pipeline, creating changes, making sure you are monitoring those changes, as well as getting them approved, and having a whole more of a software development lifecycle around it, which honestly, as me as like a security operations person in the logs, was definitely a big feat right at the very beginning. Usually you're going to use some type of automation and store all of your detections in a single spot. And then when you go change a detection in that single spot, it'll go out to whatever tool that detection's for and go make that change itself, right? A lot of security tools out there actually lack robust change control. So this actually grants that to you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that we're seeing such a shift from the traditional detection methods, right? It's basically
Hmm.
what is the opposite of that? Like it's like just literally deploying a detection on its own and
Hmm.
manually, and not really seeing kind of that change evolve over time. And
Yeah.
so we're seeing this shift from traditional detection management to obviously this detection as code based approaches. I think probably because of just how hybrid environments can be sometimes, how they're constantly changing, right? Both on
Yeah.
the threat side, both on your business landscape side, you have to introduce new assets all the time. So it's not just a matter of, just deploying a detection. You have to really be more strategic about like their life cycle. Is it still going to
Hmm.
apply? Is it, you know, so we
Yeah, yeah,
see the shift.
understanding the history of it, right? Like why was this tune added on this particular date? Or
Yeah.
maybe having a better description, right? A lot of these security tools don't necessarily give you a lot of characters to write a description. Like most of them give you like 250, 300 characters, depending on the security tool. So
Yeah.
by then breaking those detections out of that security tool gives you a much more space, much more wiggle room to write these robust detections or give information to that, maybe that triage analyst who is going to be looking at that detection, and just
Yeah.
being able to transfer knowledge in a more efficient manner.
Oh, I definitely want to touch on that like
Yeah.
collaboration aspect because I definitely do see it bringing a lot of teams together. But one thing that will like perpetually piss me off is just how inconsistent like detection rules can be. Like they're
Oh yeah.
breaking over like almost at every update. And they're in God, like is there so many payload updates, right? There's too much to do to keep up with. And then of course they've got detection rules with each of them. It's so hard to manage at once. So it's so important to have like a detection as code approach when tuning is such a big integral part of what we
Hmm.
do.
Yeah, definitely, right? And then the detection as code part, what the great part is that then you can implement some type of testing in the back end, whether that be before you implement the detection, or afterwards, or even both, right? So you could have that completely automated where when you push this new detection out, it actually runs the attack afterwards and then makes sure that detection actually works, or verifying detections here and there, or like even another step, verifying that the logging is proper, that logging standards haven't changed, which once you keep diving deeper and deeper, it becomes this huge pile of mess, and you got to understand like where to stop, otherwise the scope creep goes pretty crazy.
So let's pivot to that because
Yeah.
there's obviously the different layers of maturity within even detection as code. Like the
Hmm.
most simple one you can take is, I don't know, probably like basic integration with GitHub, but you're talking automation.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like tell us a little bit about like all like these different layers of maturity. What have you done? Have you implemented to the most mature like automated level?
So I definitely have not implemented to the most. I am definitely more of on the implement the least amount and then make sure that the people that are accepting the approvals are
Mm,
the mature people who understand what's going on and how all these detections work. So we'll say from the automation part, usually most of these detection as codes can do a couple different things, right? Either
mm,
implement a new detection, modify an existing detection, or delete or disable a prior detection, right? Whatever
okay.
that may be. And then whether that's logic, whether that's a description, or if that's just what criticality of the detection is, right? Besides
Mhm.
that, then you could also implement these testing detections within there. So I am on the boat of not implementing testing detections in detections code. I
Oh,
believe that we
why?
should
Isn't that a
test.
good thing to keep them healthy?
Yeah, it is a good thing, but it is so hard. Some of these detections are very one-offs, right? Like say if
Okay.
you're writing a detection detect AWS root account usage, right? You don't want to automate that. You don't want to have some type of automation that can then go log into AWS root. Maybe you're doing some type of log replay, but if you do replay that log, what if your logs are different now as compared to when that replay is,
Yeah.
right? So then you're going to
Wow.
have to think about that. The testing can sometimes take just as much work as the detection in the long run, or even
Mm,
further, because maybe you as a security person don't have that level of access to run those types of attacks. Usually within my detection process, I'm going to run that attack very first thing. If I can run it, I'm going to run it, make sure the logs are in place, and then build my detection off those types of logs that I'm seeing.
mhm,
So I did do a talk about this on Blue Team Con, and my
mhm.
co-speaker David French was the opposite. He was like, "No, we need to test them. We need to build that out." So it was a
Yeah.
really good talk, and we got to argue a little bit about it on stage. But it also comes down to just your time, your maturity level of your team, and what type of access and resources you guys have, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, I guess I don't know who needs to hear this, but your detection rules definitely deserve a CI/CD process. Like
Yeah.
if you're thinking about it that way, the so many benefits that can be derived from detection as code and into your frameworks, in the way that you deploy rules, the way that you maintain existing rules. What other success have you seen in terms of impacting on your posture? What's
Yeah,
that looking like?
the big thing we did hit a little bit about was like the knowledge transferability, right? So
Oh.
by implementing the detection as code, I think the knowledge transfer is the biggest thing that I've noticed, right? Not just having the overall history of the detection of when tunes were made, why tunes were made, and then notes on that, but also breaking out of the actual security tools box and being able to write out these huge reports. So
Mhm.
one of the things that I was asked to do with my most recent detections code is write these what's called Palantir alert detection strategy reports, right? So it's
Okay.
literally like a 2,000 word report on exactly what this detection is doing. What are some false positives? What are some responses on it? What are some
Mm.
resources for it? And then possibly some strategy and some link around it as well. So with every detection that we write, we actually write one of these reports as well.
Oh my
And the
gosh.
report itself is actually almost just as hard to write as the detection if you're not a good writer.
If you
But
don't
as
have
you're writing
detection as code.
yeah, yeah. As you're writing this report about this detection, though, it's really opening your eyes to the detection. And you're also
Yeah.
trying to write it down too, so anyone can be able to read this detection and read this report and know exactly what is going on and what to do about it. Right. I was super against this until I had someone persuade me against the otherwise. And I realized that this is very important. And then having those reports, those ADS reports, is important not just for the triage team, but then we'll say for Intel, right? So Intel
Mhm.
can know exactly what these are doing, or IR, or any type
Oh
of other
wow.
auditing team that's has to go over and look over your detections.
So it starts to make all these cross-functional units
Yeah.
work more cohesively.
Correct. Yeah, which is completely awesome, right? And then it
It
helps
is.
create the what the new I think a new hit term is like the threat informed defense, right? So if
Oh
threat
yes.
intel knows exactly what you're defending against, they can
Mhm.
write reports looking for those holes. Your hunt team knows exactly what you can detect. They can hunt
Mhm.
around those holes or possibly verify. The other thing is you could go hand that off to your red team and say, "Hey, do a pen test that goes around all of our detections or see if you can get around them or test our detections for us."
Oh, we love to see that detection as
Yeah.
code just makes this collaboration amongst teams and like so much better, working better together. Because these people are not sitting side by side; they're their own teams
No,
with their own reporting structures.
exactly, right? And then
Yeah,
with modern day remote, right? You're not
exactly.
sitting by anyone anymore, and a lot of people
Yeah.
don't like to shoulder tap via whatever Slack or Teams to like, hey, what does this detection do? When we usually you probably maybe should know, but
Yeah. So it's feeling better. You guys are it's also documented for
mhm.
visibility, but have you seen it take an impact on like metrics like your alert fatigue, your volume, your mean time to respond? Like how about that angle?
I will definitely say it takes
Still to be proved?
yeah, it's still to be proved and takes a
Okay.
big hit based on detection creation overall, right? It takes a lot longer because when it used to be you just go open the security tool and then just upload the logic and then maybe write a quick description. Now it's like you have to go through an entire change process and then someone has to approve all these different things. And usually what an hour may now take a full day of work to do and get across, but it's
Mhm.
building a higher quality product as well as building something that may last the test of time a little bit more. A lot of
Yeah.
times I like that my one of my pet peeves was back in the day like looking at a detection and seeing a link in the description and the links to a tweet. And then I go to that tweet and there's the tweet's been deleted. Right? Now how am I
Oh,
supposed now I have to just figure out what this detection is doing based off of just the title, that type of stuff. So writing out these reports usually is going to give you a little bit more information on exactly. Hopefully,
yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
I'm just curious because some of the conversations I've had with people who are writing detection as code, like you mentioned Python, like not everyone knows Python. Sometimes you
Yeah.
have stakeholders who can't interact with the detection in a way that might be meaningful. So is the report the way you get around that, or how do you kind of standardize?
Yeah, the report is definitely to help that, right? Sometimes I will admit, sometimes you don't even want to share the logic of your detection with people. So then you can share
Mm.
the actual report with them to say what it does and when it's been tested. But that is definitely it. Every now and then you'll come across one of those like Splunk queries that's like 30 lines long and you're like, what the heck does this do? and you're sitting there and it takes you just as long to figure out how to read it. Well, you could have just read this report where there's a couple sentences to tell you how it does, how it works, and what the strategy for it is. That is definitely a big help for it. They also like the onboarding function, right? If you get a brand new security analyst who doesn't know the network, maybe this report will help them get up to speed.
I do have one follow-up to that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
The every detection you write a report with it. Is there any pushback on the efficacy of having to go through that whole process per detection basis?
Yeah. So I will admit, maybe there's like these tiny little ones that are detection builds, right? Where it's a detection to build something else in the detection. We'll write a quick blurb on what it does. At least that's the thought of it, right? But the overall detection itself, usually there is a lot of pushback on behind it. Like I will tell you right back, I thought this was a stupid idea. I was like, I do not want to write this huge report after I have to write every detection. But after seeing it put in place, it works out pretty well. Also, it grants like the shareability. I do have some automation behind it that I've created in my spare time, but have not implemented into any type of organization that we can talk about too.
I'm thinking, so as you guys were talking, I'm thinking like, modern day, you mentioned a little bit about this too, the modern day complexities of hybrid infrastructures, right? You mentioned it, not every vendor or every security tool will come with version management, right? And then your obviously your IT environment is expanding every single day. And so adopting DAC across these diverse hybrid environments, right? And scaling around that. So how do you not centralize data, because that's obviously unrealistic, but how do you centralize the detection management and version control when you have all these tools in place, when you have all these data repos in place, and like, how do you do that?
Yeah, right. So you're going to have like one master repo where all of your detections are in, right? My thought about it is you have this one repo, you would then have folders for each tool. Each tool has, and that's just for using multiple tools. We'll say you have a SIEM, an email product, a EDR, and maybe a network security tool, right? Each one of those is going to have different detections and different logic, and you're going to store them in there, right?
And then GitHub?
Yeah, like on GitHub, in a repo, GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab. I've created this in home labs in all three environments with different stuff each time. And it's almost always the same. Then what happens if a change gets made in one of those things? It kicks off some orchestration, which is just a Python script. That Python script reads the change and says, hey, this is for the EDR. This logic has changed. Now it's not firing on anything that command prompt is the parent on. So it goes and makes that change, right? So having a centralized location of every single one of your detections is super important. And it's something that I didn't realize how powerful it was going to be until I actually like set this up and implemented, right? It used to be like half the time I was logging into like 3 different security tools to see if is there a detection for this. That now I don't have to do that. I can do a quick search.
That is amazing. Did you face any challenges when you adopted this in home labs?
The home lab part was much easier, right? Because I set everything up. So I did have to learn how to several different orchestration tools work, whether it be both Jenkins, GitHub, or GitLab runners, GitHub Actions, GitLab runners. It was just that initial hurdle, right? And then hiding private keys and stuff like that. And it's definitely getting into more of the developer range or that SecDevOps type of stuff.
Yeah.
But it was not as hard as I thought it was going to be, to tell you the truth. Yeah.
That's screaming like tech dependency here or there, integrations, like to make sure that a lot of these things are integrated to kick off these workflows.
There is a lot of that, right? The way I implemented it was all within Python. So the orchestration tools are just compute. So a Python script lives somewhere and then fires the Python whenever a change is made to the repo. And you could set that up anywhere, right? You could theoretically set it up in like just a Linux box and then have it constantly checking the repository to see if changes have been made. And that you don't necessarily have to have it in orchestration, but it's probably beneficial to do it that way.
How are you feeding that? So it looks like you've got a system down, but how are you feeding? How do you see like, oh, well, where are the gaps so that I can create a new detection to add to your folders?
Yeah. So the big thing, having all of my detections in a single spot now gives me a little bit more base to do analytics and queries across all of my detection logic. And one of the things when we're creating these detections, you're going to be mapping them to MITRE ATT&CK or whatever framework you want, right? And that's going to allow me to understand exactly where I'm detecting and what holes I'm detecting and what holes I have. I have a couple Python scripts that'll read all the detections and then actually create the MITRE ATT&CK JSON that you can then go upload to the attack navigator and see, okay, here's all the detections we have. Here's a couple holes. Maybe it's a color gradient, right? So like the super dark red, we have like more than 5. So you know that one's going to be covered, right? That is probably one of the bigger things. And then just being able to query, right? Like, do I have any detections based on Mimikatz? I can just go into the repo and say, okay, show me any detection that mentions Mimikatz. And it's like, oh, we don't have anything. That's a little bit weird. Okay, we're gonna make something for that now.
Yeah, no, that is so cool. MITRE just dropped their version 16,
Yeah.
their coverage. So hopefully yours is updated to that.
Yeah, every time they update, I have to figure out what I have to update via attack codes and stuff like that. It's usually a decent little work week afterwards.
Yeah, no, I'm just so impressed over here. Like you literally built this MITRE coverage mapping. This is something like we have.
Mhm.
So that's insane. Tell us a little bit about how that went. Like how long did that take you to build out fully? I mean, probably it's a work in process every day, but I mean, now
Yeah.
you've got it to a pretty mature state.
It's usually like as you're building out the detections, right? You should be mapping them to MITRE attack right away.
Yeah.
Depending on your organization, though, right? I've seen people with like just a couple hundred detections to people with thousands, right? You're gonna have to maybe backfill and annotate those all the way with the MITRE attack. And usually there's like a couple cool little tools you can use. Like MITRE attack actually has a browser plugin, if you didn't know about that it's called the Attack Power Suite that I use still to this day. That will help you actually annotate those, or you can do it programmatically. I know there's a couple Python scripts out there that'll actually read the description and then try to tell you what MITRE attack it is. That type of stuff. But it honestly, at the end of the day, it's hand jam. You take those 700 detections, pass them out between 7 different people, and like, all right, everyone, just like mark them what you think it is. Maybe we'll all go over it at the end of the day.
When did you get this started though? I'm trying to think.
Yeah. The first time I got introduced with the MITRE attack stuff, that honestly that could take like a week, or not even a week. It could take a couple people a day. With the detection as code stuff, I first started getting into it 2 years ago. When I got asked about it and I didn't know about it. And honestly, it probably took me like 3-4 months to get it working within a home lab, just because I didn't know about Jenkins or any type of orchestration platform. That was the hard part, was learning what I didn't know. A lot of the times, most organizations are already going to have some type of DevOps who already have this software, and that's someone you can poke. I really wanted to learn it by myself. So I just watched tons and tons of videos, read a bunch of books, set it up in a home lab. And then once I got that, the Python was actually the easy part of writing the code to interact with the different APIs. Yeah.
Wow. So when you first implemented it, what were you guys dealing with that did that kickstart this project, or like was it like a request? Like what made you guys really drive your organization to see the value of detection as code, be like, yeah, we need to get like detection as code up in here? Or was this like you told them they need detection?
Oh, no. Yeah, they told me.
Okay.
It's more of a maturity thing, right? Like, how do we manage 700 detections or 8,000 detections across multiple different tools and organizations? And how do we take our security team to the next level, right? That's the big part.
Yeah.
Like, being able, and then what does it also like the synergy of it, like how we talked about with now, okay, we have this detection as code, we have this change control put into place, we have Kanban boards of detection logic just like software, and now we also can share all these detections with a different team. Like it just matures the overall organization very quickly. And it's honestly like there's a bunch of really good write-ups out there. I can't think of one right now, but you could probably get it done within like a couple weeks if you had the right-minded people who know how to work a CI/CD pipeline or whatever orchestration tool you're using, and who know a little bit of Python code and REST APIs. The harder part, like we were talking about earlier, is writing those ADS reports, the Palantir ADS. I actually wrote a ChatGPT bot to write them for me at the end of the day. And you just give it detection logic and it writes out this full report on what this detection does, what you should do in response if it were to fire, and then how to validate it as well. It goes pretty big. I haven't been able to implement that into production just because certain organizations are.
So that's what's next.
Yeah, that's what's next. Yeah.
I mean, I can't think of any SecOps executives or CISO being like, no, I don't want healthier detections with detection as code. We're sticking to manual detection rule management. Like we need that decaf energy.
Yeah.
Like I can't think of anyone who wouldn't want that if you can implement it. Of course, across different varying levels of maturity, you can either build it yourself, you can buy a detection as code solution. We're praising you over here. We are such big fans.
Yeah, there's a bunch of good stuff out there to how to do it. You could either, like you said, you can buy products that'll do it pretty much for you, right? Just depends on what you want to do.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to security operations centers that are considering this implementation? Any lessons learned from you adopting it yourself? Like what do you think they should know?
Yeah, the first part is like understanding your current environment, right? Like I will say, if you were a very, very tiny shop, you probably don't need this as much, right? But you
Yeah.
could easily stand it up. Knowing exactly what your organization is already using for any type of orchestration platform, and then just piggybacking off of them and being able to run all your stuff off them, I would say that would be the first thing. And then
Mhm.
other, if you're mature enough to write the Python code yourself, that is probably the most essential code. If you're going to code, it doesn't have to be Python, right? That's just what I code in. But that was probably that'll probably be the biggest hump in understanding how all these different REST APIs work for whether it be a SIM, an EDR, or any type of network security tool.
Yeah, because I mean, every security solution has a API that'll allow them
Yeah,
to
yeah.
configure a rule, add a rule, change a rule. Like I can't think of one that doesn't. And if they don't, that's not a pretty good security tool.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah, I'm sure there is one out there that I just don't know about yet,
Yeah.
but most of them all have that complete and utter access with just a couple API keys. The other thing
Yeah.
is, right, is protecting those API keys, because at the end of the day, those
Oh
things now
yeah.
have keys to your entire, at least if you're doing least privilege, have the keys to all of your detections. So,
I've read somewhere that every GitHub commit, an API token is released. Like
I would,
a certain amount of API token is released out there.
yeah, I would believe it. So like in my like public repos, I will throw stuff in there though that's like canaries, right?
Okay.
So throw some fake tokens in there and then look to see if they connected. That's always a smart move.
Wow, look at that is
Yeah.
next level.
Yeah, right, right.
Yeah. Well, good. Anything else I can think of is just any concerns that anyone would have around detection as code, but I really can't think of any.
Right. Like we talked about, like you are messing around with some powerful API keys. Hopefully you can
Yeah.
least privilege them and understand that at least the risk, right, of handling those and handling your security product via an API. I would say that that would be the biggest thing, right? Some organizations don't like to do that, but
Yeah.
it's you should push, hopefully you can push forward through that and understand what benefits that this gives you at the end of the day.
So be wary about your,
Yeah.
some of those high privilege API keys when you got all this automation in place.
Oh yeah.
But no, but that was so great. You guys, listeners, Wade understood the assignment. Like I was like, "Hey, can we turn your that blue team con into a podcast like banter?" And that's what happened. That is what happened.
At least from where I've sat over the last like 5 years, I feel like detection engineering, detection as code has become much more of a household conversation in the
Oh
security
yeah.
industry.
Mhm.
People were doing kind of like static intel gathering and kind of hunting, let's integrate IOCs into our SIM. And like that's a detection, right? That's evolved. So I'm just curious from your perspective, Wade, given your background, 5 years from now, where do you see this whole kind of detection space going?
I would, so I'll give a shout out to Sublime, the email product. They have detection as code built into their tool, right? You can literally take their tool and point it at a repo, and it will watch that repo for changes. And then if there are changes made, it will implement the change within their security tool. I think that will be the next step in the future. A lot of these security products are already implementing some type of change process and control into it. But at the end of the day, if you could just point your security tool at a repo, and then the security team would or the security product would then just be offloading that entire change control to the repository, I think that's the next step. Like if I could do that with my EDR or with my SEM, right? Just say, hey, watch this repo. Here are all the detection logic for it. If anything changes, auto update. I think that'll be super important.
Wade, what do you love the most about the SecOps community, the DE community, and what do you want to be seeing more of?
I like the sharing, right? I believe that like we did definitely talk about this, right? That the sharing
We
is
did.
more on par than ever, right? And
Yeah.
if we're gonna get ahead of the threat actors and ahead of the threats, we're gonna have to share even more. I think a lot of people don't give that enough credit as just the overall sharing of the security community, at least as it's matured, and how that's been very beneficial to us defending and being able to rise up and like, right, the rising tide raises all boats, right? That's definitely what's going on with the security community, I think, right now. And hopefully it's on the correct trajectory to keep even being even better at it.
Yeah, that's a wonderful answer. It's very on brand with community sharing. Thank you so much, Wade, for coming on the podcast and talking about detection as code with me. I think this is an insane topic. It's creating so much buzz around it. I think that you are the best person to talk about this. So thank you so much for joining. And for our listeners, stay tuned for our next episode. We're going to be talking all about typo troubles and how specifically LLMs can outsmart typo squatting attacks as the holidays approach and you guys are doing your online shopping. We are, as Amphalogic, we're contributing an LLM that can outsmart a typo squat to Hugging Face as an open source initiative. So stay tuned for that episode coming soon in 2 weeks. And for the rest of you, have a wonderful day, have a wonderful weekend. And Wade, again, thank you so much. You are always welcome back on Detection Dispatch.
Oh, no, totally down. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. See you next time, everyone.